Everyone talks about RV sales slowing down. Nobody talks about what's still moving underneath. Because the real story of the RV boom was never on the lot, it was buried inside production lines that were pushed past their limits. Shortcuts didn't disappear when demand cooled. They kept moving forward into warranties, repairs, and value loss that buyers are only starting to feel now. This is the part no brochure shows. This is the RV production iceberg, and once you see what's under the surface, you'll understand why buying at the wrong time can cost you years later. Why the RV boom was misread. You watched RV lots empty faster than anyone expected. Dealers called it a boom, factories called it proof, and the industry treated it like a permanent shift. During lockdown years, travel collapsed and households redirected unused vacation money into self-contained rigs. What looked like growth was actually demand, pulled forward by fear, isolation, and temporary cash. Cushions. People bought sooner, not more. That difference mattered, but it was ignored. Dealers leaned into optimism. Sales teams told factories the surge was real and durable. Forecasts were rewritten using a narrow slice of time. Factory planners treated emergency demand like a long-term trend and approved higher output targets based on conditions that could not repeat. Production capacity expanded under the assumption that buyers would keep coming at the same pace. The warning signs were visible. First-time ownership dominated order books. Repeat buyers were scarce. Financing terms stretched longer to keep monthly payments tolerable. These were signals of borrowed demand, not sustainable growth. But fast-moving inventory hides risk, and confidence spread quickly. The industry scaled itself for a future that had already passed, and the fallout would surface in places buyers never expected. That misplaced confidence reshaped how the next problem was explained, how long waits became acceptable. Once orders outpaced delivery, waiting was reframed as normal. Dealers told customers delays were unavoidable and even reassuring. Long timelines were pitched as proof of popularity, not strain. Contracts were written with wide delivery windows, vague completion language, and limited recourse if dates slipped. Buyers were told patience was the price of getting in line. Expectation management became a sales tool. Instead of committing to clear timelines, dealers emphasized demand pressure and scarcity. Waiting 6 months became reasonable. Waiting 9 months became understandable. Waiting a year was described as industry-wide. The longer people waited, the less likely they were to walk away, especially after deposits were locked in. This wasn't chaos, it was tolerance. Dealers discovered that most buyers would accept uncertainty if it was framed as temporary and shared. Few questioned why timelines kept moving, or why accountability disappeared once paperwork was signed. Waiting shifted from a red flag into background noise. By the time frustration surfaced, buyers were already financially committed. Deposits were sunk, trade-ins were gone. Backing out meant starting over in a market that looked just as crowded. Delays weren't caused by confusion or panic. They were quietly absorbed, normalized, and passed along. And while buyers waited, control inside the industry was slipping away. If this breakdown is already changing how you see the RV market, take a second to like this video, subscribe to stay ahead of what's coming, and share your take below. These conversations help surface patterns dealers would rather keep quiet. When manufacturers lost control of parts, behind the scenes, manufacturers were no longer fully in charge of what they built. Single-source suppliers handled critical components, many sourced overseas. When those suppliers slowed or changed terms, factories had limited leverage. If a part was late, the line stalled. If a part was altered, designs had to adjust around availability. This dependency removed scheduling control. Production plans became suggestions instead of commitments. A missing component could halt dozens of builds, while excess parts piled up elsewhere. Manufacturers stopped building complete units on their own timelines and started assembling around whatever arrived first. Overseas sourcing magnified the problem. Shipping windows fluctuated. Quality varied between batches. Replacement timelines stretched unpredictably. With no backup suppliers approved, factories had no clean way to recover. Fixes could not be scheduled because the inputs were unstable. Instead of setting the pace, manufacturers reacted. Build sequences were rearranged daily. Units were parked unfinished, waiting for specific components. The production floor became a holding area rather than a flow line. Once control was lost, consistency disappeared, and inconsistency always finds its way into the final product. That loss of control would soon show up somewhere. Buyers noticed immediately why prices rose without better builds. As costs rose, prices followed, but quality did not. Sticker increases were explained as inflation, demand, and industry pressure. In reality, higher prices masked a different shift. Margins expanded while spending per unit quietly tightened. Buyers paid more, but factories did not invest proportionally back into each build. Cost increases were passed through cleanly. Price reductions were not. Dealer markups crept higher, justified by scarcity and long waits. Factory invoices rose, but internal cost controls squeezed materials and processes to protect margins. The gap between price and value widened. Buyers assumed higher cost meant better construction or improved reliability. That assumption was never guaranteed. Price reflected pressure, not refinement. More money covered inefficiencies, delays, and warranty exposure rather than stronger components or deeper testing. This disconnect mattered financially. Higher purchase prices increased depreciation risk the moment demand cooled. Loans stretched longer against products that were not improving underneath. The math stopped favoring the buyer, even as monthly payments climbed. Buyers paid more while less was spent on each unit that left the line. And this imbalance set the stage for what happens when the market finally slows. The decision to keep producing. Anyway, you never saw the decision, but it happened early. Management chose to keep R-Vee production running at planned volume, even when conditions changed. Backlogs grew, order banks swelled, and executives treated unfinished units as future revenue already earned. Output targets stayed fixed because slowing lines looked worse on reports than shipping imperfect units later. Volume protected quarterly numbers, so volume won. Factories measured success by units moved off lines, not problems solved. When bottlenecks appeared, the response was not pause and correct. It was rearrange, reroute, and push through. Production schedules became non-negotiable, even as reality shifted underneath them. The goal was simple: keep numbers up. Everything else was secondary. This choice mattered financially. Every unit pushed forward carried unresolved issues downstream. Instead of stopping to correct design flaws or assembly inconsistencies, factories counted on later fixes. Delaying correction reduced immediate costs while preserving headline output. That trade-off looked efficient on paper. Once output stayed fixed, pressure moved elsewhere. Problems could not slow the line, so they moved past it. Units left incomplete, tagged for later attention, or shipped with known compromises. The system rewarded speed, not resolution. That pressure was redirected into another system meant to protect buyers. When inspections became paperwork, inspection once meant verification. During the surge, it became confirmation. Inspection time was quietly reduced, checkpoints were consolidated, and visual approval replaced functional testing. Forms mattered more than outcomes. If paperwork cleared, units moved forward. The process shifted from catching problems to documenting progress. Checklists expanded, while inspection windows shrank. One signature covered multiple systems. A quick glance replaced measured evaluation. This was not negligence. It was design. Inspection systems were reshaped to support throughput, not interruption. Stopping a unit meant slowing the line, so inspection adapted to avoid friction. Financially, this reduced immediate expense. Fewer inspectors, less time per unit, and faster movement protected margins. The cost appeared later, but later costs did not appear on production reports. Warranty departments absorbed them quietly, long after delivery. Defects were no longer surprises. They were expected variables. Units passed inspection, knowing follow-up work would occur elsewhere. Approval did not mean ready. It meant acceptable for shipment. That distinction mattered because responsibility shifted away from the line and toward people who never saw the build itself again later on directly, clearly. When inspection becomes paperwork, problems do not disappear. They simply travel. Those problems would soon meet a workforce stretched thin. Why skill gaps couldn't be filled. Experience left quietly. Veteran builders retired, moved on, or were reassigned during the surge. New hires arrived fast, but training could not compress decades of familiarity into weeks. Modern R-Vee systems combine electrical, plumbing, structural, and digital components. Learning curves were steep, and mistakes became more frequent. Training programs focused on speed. Workers learned tasks, not systems. They knew where to install, not why it mattered. When something felt wrong, few had authority or confidence to stop progress. Errors stacked because no one saw the full picture. This was not about effort. Workers worked hard. The gap was experience. Subtle problems only appear to people who have seen them before. Without that memory, small misalignments passed unnoticed. Each unit carried slightly more risk. Financial consequences followed. Inexperienced assembly increases rework, warranty exposure, and long-term reliability costs. Those expenses surface later, after purchase, when leverage has shifted away from the buyer. That lag created inconsistency because every build depended on who happened to touch it that day, not on stable repetition across the floor over time periods that buyers never see coming. Mistakes multiplied faster than training could catch up. The system assumed learning would outrun complexity. It did not. Why warranties replaced prevention. Warranties became a planning tool. Instead of preventing defects, companies budgeted for repairs after sale. Warranty spend was forecasted like overhead. Dealers were positioned as buffers, handling fixes quietly while factories moved on to the next unit. Prevention costs money upfront. Repairs could be deferred. This model made financial sense internally. Fixing issues later avoided slowing production and protected reported output. Many repairs cost less than stopping lines to correct root causes. From an accounting view, warranty exposure was cheaper than interruption. The burden shifted outward. Dealers handled angry owners. Buyers lost time, travel plans, and confidence. Repairs happened after money changed hands, when options narrowed. The product was already financed, registered, and depreciating. This approach relies on tolerance. As long as buyers accept post-sale fixes, the system holds. But tolerance erodes with repetition. Each repair chips away at trust and resale value. Once acceptance breaks, costs rush back upstream, but by then, price damage and reputation loss are already locked in, leaving little room to reverse outcomes that buyers feel immediately and financially in the real world today, already now. Again, fixing later became cheaper than building right, and that equation only works until buyers stop accepting it. Structural problems that appear on the road. You do not feel structural stress on a dealer lot. It appears only once a R-Vee moves at speed, carries weight, and flexes across uneven pavement. Frames are designed around limits, and those limits matter when trailers twist, bounce, and absorb vibration for hours. During the surge, designs were pushed closer to tolerance, without visible warning signs. Lighter materials reduced cost and improved brochure numbers, but they also narrowed safety margins. Highway motion exposes what static inspections cannot. Fasteners loosen, joints work against themselves, and panels begin to separate under repeated stress. Weight distribution shifts as tanks fill, gear moves, and suspension compresses. What looked aligned at delivery slowly drifts out of square. Owners notice doors sticking, seams opening, and body panels creaking after a few trips. These are not cosmetic issues. Structural movement changes how loads travel through the frame. Stress concentrates where it was never intended, accelerating fatigue. Repairs become complex because movement rarely traces back to a single point. Fixes chase symptoms instead of causes. Some failures remain invisible until speed, distance, and time combine. That is when cracks appear, warranties start, and downtime begins. What breaks next does not move, it heats. Under load, damage spreads. If you want clear, proof-driven breakdowns like this before prices move and decisions get expensive, subscribe now. Upcoming reports will track where inventory pressure lands next, which builds are safest to avoid, and when timing finally shifts back in your favor. Electrical systems that can't handle load. You rarely see electrical limits until current flows. Inside a R-Vee, wiring density increased while amperage demands climbed. More appliances, inverters, and charging systems were layered onto circuits designed for lighter loads. Heat follows current, and heat is unforgiving. When insulation thins and routing tightens, temperatures rise faster than expected. Electrical stress builds quietly. Connections warm, resistance increases, and components age early. A circuit that holds during brief testing can fail after hours of draw. Cooling space is limited, and vibration compounds wear. When heat has nowhere to go, it finds weak points. That is how small faults escalate. Repairs are expensive because diagnosis is slow. Electrical problems hide behind walls, under floors, and inside bundled harnesses. Technicians chase symptoms, not sources. One failed component often masks another nearby. Labor hours climb quickly, and parts availability stretches timelines. Fire risk changes the equation entirely. Once heat damages surrounding materials, a minor failure becomes a total loss. Insurance involvement, long delays, and diminished value follow. Electrical issues do not announce themselves early. They accelerate suddenly, and costs spike without warning. Structural failures move with the road. Electrical failures spread with heat, and heat always wins. That reality drives repair bills higher. When suppliers started dictating design, availability reshaped design choices long before buyers noticed. When preferred components vanished, engineers substituted whatever could be sourced consistently. These were not upgrades, they were compromises made to keep lines moving. Mounting points changed, materials shifted, and tolerances widened to accept alternate parts. Design authority quietly slipped. Instead of engineering leading production, supply constraints dictated what was possible. If a component fit and arrived on time, it stayed. If it required redesign or delay, it was replaced. Systems were adapted piece by piece, eroding cohesion across the build. Forced redesigns create hidden complexity. Interfaces that were never tested together meet for the first time on finished units. Long-term interactions remain unknown. Vibration, heat, and load reveal mismatches slowly. Engineers document changes, but validation trails lag behind output. This approach works only while substitutions remain temporary. When alternates become standard, original design intent disappears. The product becomes a patchwork of availability decisions rather than a unified system. Engineering stopped leading when logistics took control. Once that balance shifted, recovery required time the industry refused to take. And the consequences surfaced where reputation lives. Trust erosion accelerates after these changes compound. Recovery becomes slower, costlier, and harder with each revision applied. Why trust collapses after sales peak. Reputation damage lags sales, but it accelerates faster. Problems surface slowly, then cluster. Owners compare notes, forums fill, and patterns emerge. A single complaint is noise. Dozens describing the same failure become a warning. Resale listings reflect it quickly, even before official acknowledgement. Trust erodes in stages. First comes frustration with repairs, then doubt about durability. Finally, buyers adjust expectations downward. That adjustment shows up as lower offers, longer listings, and steeper depreciation. The market recalibrates quietly, without announcements. This matters financially because reputation drives future pricing. Once confidence slips, discounts widen to move inventory. Dealers offer concessions not advertised. Trade in values soften. Financing tightens as risk perception changes. None of this requires recalls or headlines. It happens through shared experience. The damage compounds. Lower resale values trap owners longer. Longer ownership exposes more issues. More issues feed online records that never disappear. Recovery takes years, not months, because trust rebuilds slowly. Once trust breaks, pricing follows it down. That is when earlier shortcuts surface as lasting costs. And the next phase shifts who absorbs them. Those costs appear through depreciation, downtime, and lost leverage. Buyers notice only after value has already fallen. Recovery then requires patience and cash. Why smaller builders are vulnerable. You rarely see instability on the showroom floor. Smaller R-Vee builders operate on thin margins even in good years. During the surge, cash flowed in fast, but it flowed out faster. Materials were paid up front, labor costs rose weekly, and warranty reserves lagged behind reality. Revenue looked strong, while liquidity weakened. That mismatch matters when conditions turn. Warranty exposure hits small builders hardest. Each repair claim pulls cash from operations, not from distant corporate buffers. A handful of serious defects can erase months of profit. Larger manufacturers absorb that pressure across volume. Smaller shops cannot. They rely on steady inflow to fund fixes. And when sales slow, the math breaks. Consolidation pressure follows. Quickly, lenders tighten terms. Suppliers demand shorter payment windows. Insurance costs climb as claims stack. Owners face a choice between selling, merging, or cutting support. None are painless. Each option reduces independence and resilience. This instability does not announce itself. It appears as delayed support, limited parts availability, and quiet brand exits. When a builder disappears, owners inherit uncertainty overnight. Support networks vanish. Documentation stalls. Resale values drop. Fewer builders mean fewer safe choices. and the ripple moves outward. Financial risk concentrates across communities and balance sheets. How ownership risk shifted to buyers. Risk did not vanish when units left factories. It moved downstream. Financing terms stretched longer to keep payments manageable as prices climbed. Longer loans increased exposure. Owners owed more for longer on products facing faster depreciation. That imbalance changed who absorbed shocks. Repair timing became critical. When issues appear during warranty windows, inconvenience dominates. When they appear after coverage ends, cost dominates. Delays push repairs into owner responsibility. Travel plans cancel. Storage fees accrue. Lost time compounds quietly. These costs rarely appear in brochures, but they drain budgets. Safety risk followed the same path. Deferred fixes increase hazard windows. Owners weigh downtime against use, often choosing to proceed with known issues. That decision is rational when repair access is limited, but it shifts liability entirely onto the owner. Insurance responds after incidents, not before. Resale hits lock in the loss. A unit with a documented history of problems commands less interest and lower offers. Buyers discount unknowns aggressively. Depreciation accelerates, trapping owners longer than planned. Equity erodes, reducing flexibility to exit. None of this requires wrongdoing. It emerges from structure. Ownership risk became the buffer between production shortcuts and reality. Once the buyer holds that buffer, leverage disappears. Decisions narrow. Why oversight lags reality? Oversight moves slower than production for structural reasons. Inspections are periodic, not continuous. Agencies rely on reports, complaints, and incident data that arrive after products are in use. That delay is built into the system. Prevention requires visibility that oversight rarely has. Enforcement limits matter. Regulators oversee thousands of units with small teams. They prioritize severe cases, not emerging patterns. By the time trends are clear, damage is already distributed. Recalls respond to evidence, not suspicion. That evidence accumulates through owner experience. Recall delays widen exposure. Identifying scope takes time. Coordinating fixes takes longer. During that window, owners continue using affected units. Repairs occur unevenly, depending on location and access. Some never happen before resale, passing risk forward. This lag is not indifference. It is structural. Oversight frameworks were built for slower cycles. Modern production outpaces review. When fixes arrive, losses are locked in through depreciation, inconvenience, and diminished trust. Rules change after harm becomes measurable. Standards tighten only after patterns harden. That sequence protects process, not people. It explains why oversight feels reactive. By design, it is. Understanding this timing matters, because waiting for protection often costs more than acting early. The shift depends on market behavior, not rulebooks. What happens next? If nothing changes, cooling demand does not reset systems overnight. Inventory pressure remains because units were built ahead of buyers. Dealers hold aging stock financed through floor plans that charge interest monthly. As time passes, carrying costs rise, forcing decisions. Discounts appear quietly before they are advertised. Pricing windows open unevenly. Early reductions target slow movers. Deeper cuts follow when storage and financing costs outweigh hope. Timing matters. Buyers who wait gain leverage. But waiting too long narrows selection. The balance shifts week by week. Unresolved quality issues persist beneath calmer sales. Warranty backlogs remain. Parts availability lags. Service capacity stays stretched. These pressures fade slowly, usually through price. Risk concentrates in units built during peak strain, carrying higher repair odds and faster depreciation. Awareness grows, listings adjust, appraisals follow, values soften. This is correction, not collapse. Patience protects capital. Urgency transfers it elsewhere now. The R-Vee production iceberg doesn't correct all at once. It shows up quietly. One repair, one delay, one price cut at a time. And by the time most people notice, the value is already gone. If you've owned one of these rigs, or you're shopping right now, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Your experience helps expose what the numbers don't show yet. If this breakdown helped you see the market differently, hit like, subscribe, and stay ahead of what's coming next.